Our top story now, multilateral platforms are being misused to justify and protect perpetrators of terrorism. That's what External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar said in a veiled attack on China and its close ally, Pakistan.
Presiding over the United Nations Security Council open debate on maintenance of international peace and security, new orientation for reformed multilateralism, Jaishankar has also said that the knock-on effect of conflict situations have made a strong case that it cannot be business as usual in the multilateral domain.
Now, his remarks appear to be a reference to repeated holds and blocks on proposals to blacklist terrorists, particularly those based on Pakistani soil, like the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar in the UN Security Council Sanctions Committee by veto-wielding permanent members such as China.
While we search for the best solutions, what our discourse must never accept is the normalization of such threats. The question of justifying what the world regards as unacceptable should not even arise. That certainly applies to state sponsorship of cross-border terrorism. We are obviously focused today on the urgency of reforming multilateralism. We will naturally have our particular views, but there is an ongoing convergence at least that this cannot be delayed any further. The credibility of the UN depends on its effective response to the key challenges of our times, be it pandemics, climate change, conflicts or terrorism.
All right, another very disturbing news. 3 men were arrested for allegedly throwing acid on a 17-year-old schoolgirl in Delhi, and they planned that attack meticulously down to the minute details to mislead investigators, is what the police have now revealed.
That's right, Gargi. The teen has been hospitalized with serious injuries after the acid attack in Dwarka in Delhi. This took place yesterday. The police arrested all the 3 accused within 12 hours since the crime was captured on CCTV. In fact, she did also know one of the accused.
That's right. Sachin and the schoolgirl knew one another but had a falling out in September, after which they decided the attack. Thankfully, because of the CCTV, they were caught so soon. Also, what's really shocking is that they revealed to the police that they actually bought the acid from Flipkart. Let's go across to Priyanshi now for more. And Priyanshi, we know for many years now there's been this effort to restrict the sale of acid. But here you have these men and the police is saying that they bought the acid online.
Right, Gargi, the entire incident just shows us how easy it is to buy acid online and offline in India, even though there's a ban from the Supreme Court in the year 2013. According to that ban, you need a license, a valid ID proof, and to buy acid from any shop. But none of those questions are asked. And that's what the Delhi Commission for Women and also other acid attack survivors are asking after this case, that how is acid still so freely available when there's a ban in 2013? Now, to talk about this case, in this particular case, the accused bought the acid from Flipkart. That goes on to show that you don't even have to step out. You can just get it online without any questions asked, without any documents that you need to submit. And after they bought it, they planned this attack very down to the details, as 2 of them who were on a bike, Sachin Arora and Harshit Agarwal, they were on the bike and they threw acid on the schoolgirl, is what the police has said. Meanwhile, there was another accused, a person who has been arrested with them, who was Sachin, who took Sachin and Harshit were together, and there was another accused, Virender, who took Sachin's scooter to another location to mislead the police, to show that his location was not at the spot of the crime. So that's how meticulously this crime was planned by these 3 people, and they're all adults as per the police. But the victim is a 17-year-old, and she was being treated at the Safdarjung hospital. The doctor said that she has 7 to 8% burn injuries. She has injuries on her neck, above her nose, in her eyes as well. And yesterday, for hours, for 3-4 hours, there was no eye specialist to treat her at the hospital, which could have made things serious as well, because her parents were raising this concern yesterday that she has injuries on her eyes, on her neck. So all of those injuries have been on that girl only because this ban could not be implemented, even though it has been close to 10 years of that ban being announced by the Supreme Court.
Right, Priyanshi, thank you so much for joining us with all those details.
Acid thrown on a 17-year-old girl in broad daylight in West Delhi's Dwarka.
Two men on a bike can be seen throwing acid on the young girl. The victim's father says he doesn't know the two attackers.
दो लड़के बाइक पे आए हैं, पूरा अपने आप को ढक के आए हैं और उन्होंने एसिड डाल के भाग दिया, पूरे चेहरे पे उन पे डाल दिया और दोनों आंखों में चला गया.
The victim got burn injuries on her eyes, face and neck and was taken to the Safdarjung hospital for treatment.
कोई 8% के आसपास उसका बर्न है, हालांकि कंडीशन अभी स्टेबल है.
The Delhi police have arrested 3 adults in this case. But the issue raises serious questions on why, despite a ban, acid is still freely available across the country.
हम दिल्ली पुलिस को नोटिस इशू कर रहे हैं, इन दोनों को तुरंत अरेस्ट किया जाए और सख्त से सख्त सजा दिलाई जाए. पर एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल उठता है, दिल्ली महिला आयोग पिछले कई सालों से बार बार रिकमेंडेशन दे रहा है, नोटिस इशू कर रहे हैं, समन्स इशू कर रहे हैं कि कब रिटेल सेल ऑफ एसिड को बैन करोगे.
We found out how easy it is to get this deadly acid in Delhi. It was as easy for me to get this bottle of acid as easy it was to get this bag of chips. It took me less than a minute and just 35 rupees to get this bottle that is capable of ruining somebody's life forever with an acid attack. I got it from a local Kirana store in New Delhi's Green Park, but if you step out to a local store, I'm sure you'll see the same. Against what would seem the case, there's a complete ban on the sale of this very acid from the Supreme Court in the year 2013. If you have to buy it, by the rules, you need a valid ID proof, a valid license and a valid reason to buy this acid. But as I said, I got it easily, no questions asked. Because of this lack of implementation of these very rules and this ban, there's been an acid attack on a 17-year-old in the national capital's Dwarka region, and it has completely changed her life forever. Lakshmi Agarwal, a social worker who was attacked with acid at the age of 15, hopes that this case doesn't get forgotten like most others.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जो ऑर्डर आया सुप्रीम कोर्ट का, उसके बावजूद भी एसिड खुलेआम बिक रहा है. जो गवर्नमेंट है वो अभी तक सो रही है, कानून भी सो रही है. तो कहीं ना कहीं सबसे पहली चीज़, जो अटैकर है उसको एसिड कहाँ से मिला है और उसके पास वो एसिड आया कहाँ से जो उसने आके वो एसिड उसके ऊपर डाला.
In New Delhi with Mukesh Singh, camera person Prem Singh and Pooja Arya, Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.
In other news now, 3 people, one of them a child, died during a stampede at a program to distribute blankets in Bengal's Asansol.
Police sources have indicated proper permission was not taken for a mass gathering, and the leader of opposition in the assembly, the BJP's Suvendu Adhikari, had attended the program, and the trouble started after he left, is what the police had to say.
Reports say there was chaos as people jostled and to get close to the dais where the organizers, a religious organization, was distributing the blankets. 5 people were injured. Trinamool went and attacked Suvendu Adhikari over this incident, saying he thinks he's above the law.
Suvendu Adhikari issued a statement expressing grief over the incident and said the deaths and injuries were absolutely unfortunate, sorrowful and tragic. Welcome back. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman hits back at Trinamool Congress's Mahua Moitra, saying that she should look into her own background to search for Pappu, hurling the Bengal MP's jibe back at her.
This following Moitra's questioning of macroeconomic fundamentals packed in the "Who is Pappu Now" swipe. Sitharaman delivered a lengthy and derisive rebuttal in the Lok Sabha on Wednesday, pointing at Bengal government's boycott of the central government schemes.
This government has us believe every February that this country's economy is going great guns. We are the fastest growing, most efficient global player. Everyone is getting employment. We're getting gas cylinders. We're getting electricity. This year has already seen more people giving up Indian citizenship than any single given year. High net worth individuals are willing to pay up to $1 million to get citizenship of Portugal, of St. Kitts, of Greece. Is this the sign of a healthy economic environment, of a healthy tax environment? Who's the Pappu now? NSO numbers were out yesterday. Industrial output has shrunk by 4% in October to a 26-month low. The manufacturing sector contracted 5.6%. Manufacturing is still the biggest generator of jobs. 17 of the industry sectors that make up the index of industrial production have recorded negative growth rates. Forex reserves have fallen by $72 billion in under a year.
Honorable Member Mahua Moitra said about where one should find Pappu, who's the Pappu, where's the Pappu, and so on. Actually, either West Bengal in the... Sorry? So, all the fundamental macroeconomic fundamentals being questioned. There was this question of where is the Pappu, who's the Pappu, who's the Pappu. Actually, if only Honorable Member looks back into her own backyard, she'll find Pappu in West Bengal. So there's no doubt, where there are wonderful schemes which can benefit common people, West Bengal sits over it, doesn't distribute it. You don't need to search anywhere else for Pappu. But even worse, sir, even worse is this point. माचिस किसके हाथ में है? हमारे हाथ में जब माचिस थी, हमने उज्ज्वला दिया, हमने उजाला दिया, हमने पीएम किसान दिया, हमने स्वच्छ भारत अभियान चलाए। जब आपके हाथ में आया माचिस, आर्सन हुआ, लूटिंग हुआ, रेप हुआ, हमारे कार्यकर्ता के घर जला दिया, और ऊपर से एक केंद्र मंत्री MOS मुरलीधरन, उनके गाड़ी के ऊपर इतना अटैक हुआ, सेंट्रल मंत्री तक सेफ नहीं था पोस्ट इलेक्शन।
Home Minister Amit Shah met Karnataka's Chief Minister and Maharashtra's Chief Minister at the Parliament Library amid a flare-up of the border dispute that dates back to 1957. Amit Shah has said that the Chief Ministers have agreed not to press their claims in the 6 decades-long state border dispute till the Supreme Court's decision on the matter.
जब तक सुप्रीम कोर्ट का इस बारे में निर्णय नहीं आता, कोई भी राज्य इसके बारे में एक दूसरे राज्य पर क्लेम या तो डिमांड जनरेट नहीं करेगा। दूसरा, दोनों राज्यों के मिलाकर दोनों ओर से 6 मंत्री बैठेंगे और इस पर डिटेल नीचे तक परकोलेशन किस प्रकार से हो, इसकी चिंता और चर्चा करेंगे।
Bharat Rashtra Samiti's office has been inaugurated in Delhi along with the Telangana Chief Minister and Party Chief KCR. His daughter and State Legislator Kavita were also there.
Well, also Samajwadi Party Chief Akhilesh Yadav, JDS leader HD Kumaraswamy and others participated in the inauguration ceremony which took place yesterday of the BRS office in Delhi.
This comes a day after the election commission approved the change of the name of Telangana Rashtra Samiti to Bharat Rashtra Samiti. So now they will have to say BRS.
Right, the new name being symbolic of KCR's national ambitions, Gargi. Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan joined Congress leader Rahul Gandhi during his Bharat Jodo Yatra yesterday.
That's right, and videos shared on social media showed Mr. Rajan and Mr. Gandhi having a discussion while marching as the Congress's foot march resumed from Savai Madhopur in Rajasthan.
Reacting to the former RBI Governor's participation in the foot march, the BJP said Mr. Rajan fancies himself as the next Manmohan Singh.
He also called his commentaries on the Indian economy opportunistic.
जो किसान हैं, गरीब लोग हैं, उनका एक हिंदुस्तान बन रहा है और फिर ये 5, 6, 10, 15 लोग हैं जिनका दूसरा हिंदुस्तान बन रहा है।
जो बीच में है, ये लोअर मिडिल क्लास जो है, उनको काफी नुकसान हुआ। नौकरी तो बंद हो गई, बेरोजगारी बढ़ रही है, कर्ज बढ़ रही है, वो कर्ज ले रहे हैं, ब्याज दर अभी बढ़ रही है। रिगार्डलेस ऑफ व्हाट पॉलिटिकल पार्टी और इट हैज टू बी, भारत को जोड़ना है।
बिल्कुल।
Which house can stand when the brothers are fighting? You have to have internal harmony to have external security.
In yet another huge tragedy in Bihar, 20 people have lost their lives in over 20 are undergoing a treatment. Gargi.
That's right, and these deaths have snowballed into a major political controversy, with Chief Minister Nitish Kumar angrily accused the opposition for what he described as a drunk.
At least 20 people have died after drinking spurious liquor in Bihar's Saran district on Tuesday. Most of the victims brought here to the Chhapra Sadar hospital are from nearby villages.
शराब पिए थे, उसके बाद में सही थे, एक बार रात में ज़्यादा हालत खराब हो।
हमारे भाई तो मतलब बहुत बेचैनी में थे और बोले कि ऐसे आंख से कुछ नहीं दिखाई दे रहा है हमको।
Some of those fortunate to have survived have lost their eyesight. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar imposed prohibition in 2016, and since then there have been at least 500 deaths due to spurious liquor. However, today the Chief Minister lost his temper in the Assembly when questioned by the opposition BJP, accusing them of supporting illicit liquor and being drunk.
गैर संवैधानिक मर्यादा आप जिस तरह से प्रदर्शित कर रहे हैं, आप इस पद के योग्य नहीं हैं। आप माफी मांगे, नहीं तो लोकतंत्र में आप एक लज्जित पुरुष के रूप में जाने जाएंगे।
सत्ता में भाजपा कितने साल रहे, आज इनको याद आ रहा है कि जहरीली शराब से लोग मर रहे हैं। भाजपा लगभग 10 साल से भी ज्यादा 15 साल तक बिहार में काबिज रही, इन्होंने क्या किया?
But despite many pointing out how prohibition in Bihar has failed, the Chief Minister Nitish Kumar unlikely to relent on this issue and accept defeat on a pet issue. With Manish Kumar, Sneha Koshi for NDTV.
Now, Parliament news, and on Wednesday, 18 opposition parties, including the Aam Aadmi Party and TRS, attended a strategy meeting called by the Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge, and later walked out in sync over the government's refusal to discuss the India-China clashes.
That's right, Gargi. While the TMC skipped Mr. Kharge's meeting, they later participated in a walkout along with the rest of the opposition as they protested the chair's refusal to allow a discussion on the Tawang clashes. Sonia Gandhi led the Congress MPs out of the Lok Sabha.
चीन के बारे में हम सुओ मोटो स्टेटमेंट दिया है और बाकी जो चर्चा उन्होंने मांगा है उसके लिए हम चर्चा के लिए तैयार हैं। सदन नहीं चलने देगा, आज स्ट्रैटेजी मीटिंग भी ऑपोजिशन के साथ नहीं, वो तो सदन अभी तक तो चल रहा है, मुझे लगता है आगे भी वो चलाने देंगे, यही मैं आशा करता हूँ।
हमने जो नोटिस कल भी दिए थे और आज भी दिए हैं कि चाइनीज एग्रेशन के बारे में और जो अतिक्रमण हुआ है इसके बारे में हम डिटेल चर्चा इस सदन में चाहते हैं और इसीलिए हम पहले से हमारी कोशिश रही है कि हमको पूरी जानकारी मिले और देश के लोगों को भी जानकारी हो कि वहाँ की एक्चुअल स्थिति क्या है।
भारत का इंपोर्ट बढ़ा है, 97 बिलियन डॉलर। चीन के साथ हमारा व्यापार बढ़ा है, कम नहीं हुआ। इंपोर्ट 31% बढ़ा है। हमारी सीमा की सुरक्षा को लेके भारत की सरकार क्या कर रही है?
In other news, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport and Tourism summoned senior officials of the Delhi International Airport on the subject of development of greenfield and brownfield airports.
Right, the committee will be seeking a clarification as far as the Delhi airport officials are concerned on issues related with congestion and inconvenience that's being faced by the passengers. And NDTV spoke to Civil Aviation Minister Jyotirao Scindia on the congestion at the Delhi airport, and that interview coming up right after a short break.
For several days now, you must have seen users, passengers on social media putting up pictures of chaos at Delhi's T3 airport at the Indira Gandhi International Airport, complaining of long lines, congestion, etc. And today there has been some easing of that congestion after the Civil Aviation Minister stepped in himself He went to inspect things at the airport a few days ago, and the government announced a series of measures it was putting in place to try and ease that chaos. So some easing has taken place, but there is still a long way to go. There are complaints also today from Bangalore's international airport of long lines at immigration and security as well. And joining us now to talk about this is the Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia. Mr. Scindia, thank you very much for speaking to us today. I just wanted to begin by asking you that when you went for this inspection, what really struck you as the primary reasons why this congestion was happening? Because otherwise, it really hasn't been a problem traveling in Indian airports until recently.
So first of all, thank you for having me, Nidhi. Let me say this to you and through you to our viewers as well, that the civil aviation sector in India has experienced a V-shaped recovery from a status of having our planes just sitting on the ground on the tarmac to today all being in the air. From a period of pre-COVID where we had a high of roughly about 4.1 passengers per day. This week we have breached that number. We had 4.28 lakh passengers per day. We've surpassed 4 lakhs for 3 or 4 days in a row in this past week. And that indeed is a very heartening sign for the sector. But having said that, it brings with it issues of logistics, issues of operations. In between the value chain of passengers who are desirous of travel, as well as airlines who are very eager to provide that service, sits the airport. The airport's responsibility to ensure that it provides a seamless, efficient process by which the customers can get to the aircraft and complete their journey. Now, obviously, no one had anticipated the level of travel this festive season as has been played out. That being said, I very firmly believe that it is the airport operator's responsibility to provide that service, which is why on the 7th of this month, I held a meeting in the ministry with all the airport operators, very clearly articulating the pain points, and we tried to evolve some solutions. Now, let me give you an example of that. Delhi Airport has a total of 14 gates for passengers and 2 gates for crew and our specially abled. We insisted that by the 12th of December, that must increase to 16 gates for passengers and 2 gates maintained for our crew and specially abled. I'm glad to report to you that on the 12th of December, when I went for my inspection, and that's one of the reasons I went for my inspection, is to see the execution of what we had committed to, that step had been taken. The second area and the most important area of the bottleneck in the critical path of passengers passing through the airport is the security check. And there the problem is really not Nidhi or CIS staff. The problem is that we do not have enough lines for security check. The number of lines that we had were 11 for passengers and 3 for crew and specially abled. We mandated on the meeting on the 7th that by the time I come on the 12th for a surprise visit, which was not expected, we must grow that number to 16 in total for both passengers as well as crew. On the 12th when I went, we had 16 lines in place. So we had an increase of almost close to about 20% in our capacity of security check-in. The third area and then we had a meeting for 3 hours at the airport. And we identified the following steps that need to be executed on a very strict schedule and timeline. The first step that I said is we need to have usherers outside the entrance gate. So that if Nidhi Razdan is traveling and gate number 4 is totally clogged, the usherer should be able to tell Nidhi Razdan, kindly go to gate number 9 because that is clear. How will the usherer be able to do that? I said set up a command and control center within the airport that monitors through video feed the crowd at every gate so that the usherer can be told by walkie-talkie from the command and control center where they should push the passengers to enable free passage. That, I'm glad to report to you, has been in place from the 12th of December night, the day I mandated it to happen. The second step that I said must take place is that above every gate, you must have a digital TV screen that shows the queuing capacity and the queuing waiting time for every gate. So if I'm a passenger, That's right. So if I'm a passenger and I go to gate number 6 and there's a 20-minute queuing time and gate number 11 has only a 2-minute queuing time, I'll immediately go to gate number 11. That has been put in place on every gate. The third point that I mandated on the 12th of December was that if you recall, there's a Naka almost 1.5 kilometers before the airport where cars slow down and there's a barrier and a security check. I said, put up a huge digital screen at that Naka as well, so that if Nidhi Razdan is traveling, when she reaches the Naka, she knows which entry gate to go to. So there's a warning sign in advance as to which is the best entry gate to go to. That has been put in place as of yesterday.
Let me just ask you this. We noticed a change today because it was clear that people were getting into the airport much faster today than they have in recent days. But inside security was still an issue. You know, it was still up to 50 minutes for some people, half an hour for others. So obviously that's going to take some more time. Do you need more CISF personnel at security?
So if you allow me to finish, because I know this is going to take a little time, but I ask you to bear with me, because it's taken us a lot of groundwork.
What will the anchor do if you speak?
I think for once, because this is a public interest issue, please let me articulate
this is your Mann Ki Baat.
that we're having in place. So what I was saying to you, the fifth initiative that we took is that this information with regard to entry gates must be put up on the Dial Twitter network as well as every airline. And if you've noticed, that has been done as well. We now move to the security check-in areas, which is the security check areas, which is the second bottleneck. As I mentioned to you, we have only had 11 plus 2 in place, which was augmented to 16 on the 12th of December. I went and inspected the areas myself, and there were 2 rows of 5 and 5 security lines with a huge barrier in between. I said, why don't we remove this barrier and create an extra line? And we had mandated that by today, which is by the 14th, that 17th security line should be created. And I'm glad to report to your viewers that the 17th security line has been created. So we've gone from 11 plus 2 to 17 today. My target is that by the end of this month, we should move to a number of 20 security lines at the Delhi airport. The next step that we had also looked at was with regard to CISF. And I'm glad to report to you that there is no shortage of CISF personnel manning security lines or even the augmented capacity. The DG of CISF was with me in that 3-hour meeting. We very fairly and squarely asked the Dial management, do you have a shortage of CISF staff? The clear answer was no, they are supporting us in every move we make. Therefore, the CISF issue is no longer an issue. The last point I want to make to you is that we also must look at the supply side. The fact is that if you look at it from an operations perspective, you cannot have a large number of landings and takeoff, which is beyond your capability of throughput of the airport. And that's the position that Dial is in today. We have close to almost 10% more than what the airport can feed. Exactly. So what I have said after discussion is lower the landings and takeoffs in peak hours, which is 0500 to 0900, and move those landings and takeoffs to either non-peak hours during the day in T3 or move them to peak hours in T1 and T2. That will also ameliorate the situation in terms of the congestion and the clogging. That is supposed to happen by the end of this week or early next week, because the airlines also have to be brought on board. I don't want to inconvenience our passengers too much as well. So a little bit of blending will have to take place, which we are working on.
Right.
The final point I want to make to you,
it's quite appreciated that, you know, all these steps have been taken and that you responded to people on social media. You took note of the concerns that they flagged and intervened here. But today, Mr. Scindia, passengers are complaining at Bangalore airport about similar congestion at immigration as well as security lines there.
So if you had allowed me, I would have covered that point as well, but I'm glad you asked.
But I have to ask you something.
I'm glad you asked the question. So I want to tell you that we have a 11-point template, which I'm monitoring myself on a twice-a-day basis in terms of what needs to be done in Delhi. The similar template has been created for Mumbai and for Bangalore. Please understand that Mumbai also has reached a new high. The last high in Mumbai was in 2017, which was roughly about 75 to 80,000 passengers per day. Yesterday, Mumbai touched 1.1 lakh passengers. The problem in Mumbai and in Bangalore is nowhere close to the problem in Delhi. But we need to make sure we tell all of these airports to make sure that the traveling experience for our customers is not as painful as it has been for the last 4 or 5 days. I understand the anxiety and the exasperation that customers have gone through. I do also understand that it is the job of the airports to provide a seamless process. We are coming down extremely, extremely diligently with regard to every airport, and we will ensure that we put in place measures for the short and medium term as well as long term. By the end of this year or next year, we propose to increase
the fact that the
security
actually
lines in Delhi Airport to 23. And I have also said that the execution of T1, which will increase our capacity and resolve our problems in Delhi, which is slated, I think, for December or Jan of 23-24, we need to move up to November or so prior to the holiday season so that this congestion does not happen next year in Delhi.
So how long do you expect this congestion, to last in Delhi in particular?
So
Are we looking at January, mid-January sometime?
So I think it's a factor of both increasing travelers as well as increasing landing and takeoff. So therefore, when we're looking at ameliorating the whole value chain, which is making sure we increase the capacity of entry and security and check-in, all 3 points at the airport, we lower the number of takeoffs and landings in peak hours, I think we will be able to flatten out volatility that Delhi Airport is experiencing currently. We have very high crests in peak hours 0500 to 0900, and then we have a
But do you have a deadline in mind by when this can happen?
Curve. We need to flatten out that volatility, which is what we're intending to do in the next 7 to 10 days.
7 to 10 days. Okay, Mr. Sindhia, one final question now that we have you here. There was a report today in the Times of India, that says that the International Civil Aviation Organization has clarified that it did not conduct any audit of SpiceJet, whereas the airline says that the organization did audit its safety recently. It's a bit concerning, this report. Anything you can tell us about this?
Well, let me tell you very clearly, first of all, the good news is that India that was in the last audit of ICAO at the 102nd position, which was done in 2018. We have moved today in 2022 to the 48th position. So we are amongst the most developed countries of the world today in terms of safety and security within our aviation network as mandated and as certified by the International Civil Aviation Organization. Across all parameters, there are a total of 8 parameters across which ICAO judges you. Across all parameters, we have seen an increase, save 2 areas which were not audited. Across 6, we have seen an increase, and our total score has gone from roughly a low score of 69 to almost 86 or 87%. So that's great news with regard to civil aviation in India in terms of our systems and processes, which we have tried to improve over the last 4 years. As far as this particular report is concerned, let me repeat that ICAO does not audit, investigate, certify any airline. ICAO only certifies, investigates and audits civil aviation sectors in a particular country. In our case, DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation.
So is SpiceJet being asked for an explanation?
As far as that report is concerned, whatever needs to be done will be done. But let me clarify for you and your viewers that this certification and audit is meant only for DGCA and not for any airline.
Because SpiceJet made this as a public declaration. Therefore, will the airline be summoned to explain?
I have answered the question very fairly and squarely.
All right, Mr. Sindhia, thank you for your time today, for joining us on the airport chaos in particular. That is something that concerns all travelers in this country. Let's hope that things do get better in the next 7 to 10 days, which is what you have set out as a target. Thank you.
Now, India buying oil from Russia amid the war in Ukraine is perfectly fine as G7 nations and their allies have agreed on a price cap on Russian oil, is what Geeta Gopinath has said in an exclusive interview to NDTV.
Ms. Gopinath, who's in India to attend G20 meetings, has said from the world's perspective, what's important is to make sure supply of oil in the market remains at a high level, and India buying oil from Russia is consistent with the price cap strategy the US and Europe currently have.
Good evening and welcome to this NDTV special interview. We are joined tonight by Geeta Gopinath of the International Monetary Fund, currently in Bengaluru for G20 meetings. Dr. Gopinath, thank you so much for joining NDTV. You're in India for these G20 meetings at a time that we have taken over the G20 presidency. What do you see as the significance of India's G20 presidency?
Hi, Sonia. The way I see it, the global economy is going through a difficult period and there are many global challenges. And with India taking over the presidency, I think there is a lot of optimism of being able to address several of these challenges that require cooperation across the world. So as an example, when you think of food security and energy security, it requires cross-country collaboration. We have many countries with very high levels of debt and that are entering debt distress. For that to be able to provide debt resolution, global cooperation is needed. We need work on the crypto front, similarly on climate finance. So all of these are big actions that are required, and India is a champion of the global south and therefore has a very important role to play through its presidency.
Taking up on that point you've made on India, the champion of the global south, what specifically are the areas which you think India as a representative of these concerns of developing emerging economies will take up during this 1 year?
There are several. I would say one important area is on digital inclusion. India has really been a pioneer and at the forefront of building up digital public infrastructure. The policy design has been very smart to be able to make sure that it's widely available, and all the applications are bearing fruit when it comes to raising, for instance, tax revenues, but also making sure that spending is much more targeted, social spending is much more targeted, and more generally greater financial inclusion for a large number of people. And this, for instance, is a model that many other countries in the global south can emulate and they look up to in terms of what India has managed to achieve. So this is one area. A second area which India cares a lot about is in the matter of debt. The G20 produced the what's called the common framework, which is to help countries that have high levels of debt distress restructure their debt. It's a process that has moved in fits and starts. It has made some progress, but we need things to move much more in a timely manner. And India is pushing hard to make concrete progress on that front. And the third area is crypto, where again India has views on how to regulate the crypto landscape and what are the benefits and costs for society. So that's another third area.
Absolutely. And in fact, Geeta Gopinath, the other aspect which we're all looking at, in fact, I remember the last time we spoke in January 2022, we were just coming out of the COVID pandemic and global recession, and there was much hope. But then the Ukraine war hit the world. Now, the Prime Minister Modi, has told President Putin that this is not the era of war. What do you think the cost of war has been on the global economy, especially going now into 2023?
The war has been very, very costly. It's a major humanitarian crisis, of course, in Ukraine and an economic crisis with the Ukrainian economy projected to shrink by a third this year because of Russia's invasion. But we see spillovers to the rest of the world. I mean, Europe is very hard hit by gas prices. We've seen food insecurity rise, especially as fertilizer production has slowed around the world and there's been restriction of exports out of Ukraine. So more generally, it has fed into a cost of living crisis around the world. So it's costly. We estimated in October that just looking at the events that happened in this particular year, about $4 trillion was shaved out of global economy. So it's a very substantial hit, and everybody agrees that this war needs to end. It's the only way we can ensure prosperity and bring back stability into the world.
Right, and you talked also, Ms. Gopinath, Dr. Gopinath, about this whole aspect of energy security. Now, India has been very strong in making the point that we will buy oil from wherever it's needed, including Russia. We've been criticized by Europe for this. Mr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, has called out European double standards. What's your take on this, on India's stand on buying Russian oil?
You know, from the world's perspective, what is important is to make sure that the supply of oil on the market remains at a high level, right? Which then would require that there are buyers on the other side. And so India buying oil, for instance, from Russia is completely consistent with the price cap strategy that was rolled out very recently between the US and Europe. So, you know, that would be consistent. We do need supply to come on to the market, and if countries like India can get it at the lower price with the price cap, I think that's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. So do you agree that there have been, in that sense, double standards by the United States, by Europe, by Western countries when it comes to looking at, say, the global South and India's geopolitical stance, especially in buying oil or doing business with countries like Russia?
Well, I don't necessarily, I mean, I think we are in a period where there are a lot of geopolitical tensions. There are countries who feel differently about how exactly to react to this war. We certainly have that. And one of the positives of the G20 is that you bring together everybody to have these open conversations and move forward. So I think these frictions and tensions will always remain, but I actually do see progress being made. I have to say, you know, after February and the invasion that happened, I was quite concerned about what the G20 could deliver. But by the end, and when we had the Leaders Summit in November in Bali, I felt hopeful that actually this forum could deliver.
Mm-hmm. And also various global reports and global agencies have projected that India is projected to become the world's third largest economy by 2030. What's your view on the decade ahead? Is this going to be India's decade economically on the global front?
I'd say there's a lot of optimism about India right now from people I talk to externally, but also people that I'm talking to in India. India, I would say, is a relative bright spot in terms of the growth landscape. Again, we have projected global growth to slow down to 2.7% next year, with about a third of countries having negative growth this year or next year. Mm-hmm. So in comparative terms, India is doing well. And there is a keen interest to diversify imports from, you know, just relying on a couple of countries to more countries. And I think India is benefiting from that. I certainly see more countries wanting to do their manufacturing in India. These are positives. I think the digital public infrastructure in India is very attractive. The general investment that's happened in infrastructure more generally has been very well recognized. There's, of course, a lot more work that needs to be done, but there is a lot of hope too.
Mm-hmm. So what would you identify, of course, as somebody who's studied in India, from India, what would you identify as the key challenges and opportunities for India? Because, of course, one of the axioms here is that in India that two contradictory things can be completely true at the same time. So at the one hand, the number of Indian billionaires are growing, but we also see unemployment growing especially amongst the youth, as we are also projected to become the most populous country in the world in a few years.
In terms of challenges, I agree with what you just said in terms of the labor market and employment. Creating sufficient jobs, creating high quality jobs is going to be a challenge for India. We've seen employment recover, but it still remains low. And if you look at female labor force participation, youth labor force participation, it's at very low levels. So a lot more work is needed on that front to be able to create enough jobs and to be able to make sure that they're high quality jobs. A second area of challenge will be in terms of fiscal consolidation. You know, these are difficult times. There are lots of vulnerable people. You know, on the positive side, India is doing very well in terms of revenue collection. This is coming through GST, but also through income tax. And again, the digital public infrastructure has a very important role that it's playing in able to get higher yields from taxes, but expenditures have also gone up. And so the way to make sure that you actually have a sound fiscal position over the years, you need to have a medium-term fiscal framework, fiscal rules. I'd say that's the second challenge. In terms of opportunities, of course, there are also several. Like I said, everybody is looking to India as a source for diversifying away where they buy from. And for India to be able to get into the global supply chain much more prominently, that I think is an important opportunity. Recently, India has entered trade agreements with the UAE, with Australia, and they're trying to do that with more countries. I think that's a positive step. But more generally, India's trade policy should move towards making sure that there are inputs that can be purchased, that you can get the right relevant inputs into the country, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to attract foreign direct investment at a much larger scale.
Right. So that point you're making, just to pick up on the whole global looking at diversification of, say, maybe manufacturing inputs coming in, this is the right time you feel for India to perhaps capitalize on the slowdown in China?
There is certainly a keen interest in many countries to move away from relying exclusively on China to other markets. And India is a country that has that opportunity and can seize that opportunity. You're certainly seeing that. Now, foreign direct investment into India has remained about stable at around 2%. If you want to raise that more, a lot more will need to be done. Again, good action has been taken on infrastructure. That's very good. New agreements, trade agreements will help. But more will be needed, for instance, when it comes to labor policy, when it comes to land policy, to be able to completely seize the opportunity.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because, of course, sometimes you see people within India saying there's too much democracy, and that sometimes is a hurdle to those changes that you're talking about. But really, isn't India's democracy, as compared to what we see in China and Russia, one of the key factors for India's growth and attractiveness to international investors?
Absolutely. I mean, India's democracy is one of the factors that makes India an attractive destination for investors around the world.
And also, Dr. Gopinath, when we had last talked at the beginning of the year, you had talked about how at one time, of course, the world was hit by the Great Depression, and how with COVID we saw a global recession. But now some good news coming in on inflation. This is something the IMF had flagged as a big concern globally. But what would you say on the latest US figures and Indian figures, just showing some stability regarding inflation rates?
So in October, we had projected that global inflation would peak this year. And we're talking about headline inflation, would peak this year and decline slowly. But importantly, what we said is that it would take several quarters for inflation to come back down to targets. The data that we're seeing is very much in line with that projection. We've seen, for instance, in the US, 2 months of positive news on the inflation front, with inflation coming down. But at the same time, the more sticky components of inflation, which is what the central banks care about, has been high at 6%. So, what we expect to see is monetary policy staying the course. They've tightened quite substantially over the last several months. I mean, in terms of historical comparisons, this is a really very fast pace of tightening. And now going forward, we expect to see more modest tightening to happen. And I think the bigger question then is, how long do you keep interest rates at that level? As of now, we see that the US Fed, for instance, would likely need to hold until the end of 2023 at least. But we'll see as we see more incoming data. So we are entering a period, looking ahead, where financial conditions will remain tight. We will see the consequences of all the tightening that's happened play out in the world. We have concerns about China and China's growth, which of course has implications for the rest of the world. So there are many headwinds. The energy markets are still not settled. And I'd say the next 6 months could be quite turbulent.
So as we draw to the end of 2022, looking ahead to, well, perhaps a turbulent 2023, what would you today as a global economist say to the world's politicians?
I would say that what's absolutely critical is to make sure that you have inclusive recoveries, sustainable recoveries, and ensure that employment is protected as best possible, because that is absolutely essential to make sure that the right reforms can happen in their countries.
Inclusive and sustainable recovery, Geeta Gopinath. I think that's advice everyone should be listening to. Thank you so much for joining us on NDTV. Thank you.
Welcome back. Let's now focus on the most recent incident of acid attack in the national capital. 3 men were arrested for allegedly throwing acid on a 17-year-old schoolgirl in Delhi, and it's now emerged that they had planned the attack quite meticulously, down to the minute details, to mislead investigators. The teen has been hospitalized with serious injuries after the acid attack in southwest Delhi's Dwarka. This took place yesterday morning. The police arrested all the 3 accused within 12 hours since the crime was captured on CCTV. Now, the 3 have been identified as Sachin Arora, Harshit Agarwal and Virender Singh. Sachin and the schoolgirl knew one another but had a fallout in September, after which Sachin decided on this acid attack. Also, the police have revealed that the acid was actually purchased on Flipkart. So, it was purchased online. So that's another shocking aspect of this entire incident. Let's go across to Priyanshi now for more. And Priyanshi, what is the state of the 17-year-old, and also the fact that, there's so many laws that are supposed to be in place to regulate acid sales, but in this case, the police are saying that the men bought it online.
Right, Kargi, first to answer your question about the condition of the victim, she's in the Safdarjung hospital, and we spoke to the medical superintendent there as well, and they've said that they need another day or 2 to actually gauge her condition and to assess the wounds, because these are burn wounds on her eyes, on her face, on her neck as well. So they still need more time to assess those wounds. So she's still being treated, but the condition is stable. She's not critical as of yet, is what the hospital authorities have told us. Now, the point that the police has mentioned, that the attackers bought this acid that they attacked the victim with online. They got it from the online shopping platform Flipkart. That just goes on to show how easy it is to buy acids in India, both online and offline, despite there being a ban. There was a ban from the Supreme Court in the year 2013. So there's been close to 9 years to that ban. And that ban mandates that if you have to buy acid, you have to present an ID proof, a license, and a valid reason to get that bottle of acid. But none of those questions are asked. You can get it easily online. And that's just raising a lot of questions on these bans are formed, these fast-track courts are formed, but none of these are implemented. That's what acid attack survivors are also questioning, that all of these rules and bans are made, but they're not implemented, and this lack of implementation is actually leading to more such acid attacks. If we also talk about conviction, first of all, the ban is not implemented. Second, the attackers are not even punished. The conviction rate in these cases is just 20%. That means only 1 in 5 acid attackers actually get punished. So that all of these factors, activists and social workers are saying all of these factors contribute to reducing the fear of the people to carry out such heinous crimes.